This is the regular meeting of the Mobile City Council, Tuesday, August the 23rd. Please stand for an invocation by Pastor Josh Sparkman, Christ Presbyterian Church, and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Father God, we just thank you right now, God, for the city of Mobile. We thank you for the staff, the council. Thank you for the administration right now, God. Thank you, Lord, that you're using us to give us wisdom, God, and direction, that we work together in unity, God, to move the city of Mobile forward right now, God. Thank you right now, God, that the city of Mobile is blessed and favored. Companies and businesses are coming from near and far, that we have the resources to fix our infrastructure right now, God. We thank you for money that is coming in. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Roll call, President Small.
Here.
Vice President Gregory.
Here.
Councilmember Penn.
Here.
Councilmember Carroll.
Here.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Here.
Councilmember Daves.
Here.
Councilmember Jones. Statement of rules.
And good morning, everyone.
Morning.
It's good to see everyone at our meeting. At this meeting, we do have council rules. At this time, I ask if anyone has any type of electronic device, please put on the off or the vibrator position, the off or the vibrator position. Any person desiring to address the council must sign in indicating the resolution, the ordinance, appeal, or public hearing agenda item before entering the meeting. When addressing the council, the speaker must state his or her name and address. Any person desiring to speak to the council on a non-agenda item must contact the city clerk office no later than 2:00 p.m. on the Thursday prior to the council meeting. The subject that he or she wishes to address must be identified and pertain to the city of Mobile business. Any person who has not given proper notice to the city clerk office and wishes to speak on a non-agenda item would not be allowed to address the council. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes to address the council. A bell will sound to indicate the end of 2 minutes. 1 minute remains for summarizing. The second bell indicates the time has expired. When addressing the council, there will be no personal address to any individual council members. All statements are to be made to the chair, who will recognize any council member who wishes to respond. To maintain decorum, all persons in attendance at council meeting shall refrain from making comments regarding the good name and character of any individual, using language that insult or demeans any person, or use of profanity or vulgar language or gestures. Attendants at council meetings shall not interrupt speakers, engage in behaviors that disrupt the meeting, including but not limited to applause, cheers, jeers, yelling, shouting, and etc., or engage in behavior that intimidates others or incites violence or disorder. Any person, attendees who fail to comply with the directives of the presiding officer to follow the council rules or otherwise disrupt a council meeting in any manner shall be held out of order in order to leave the speaker podium and be ordered to leave the council chamber by the presiding officer. Any person so expelled shall be readmitted for the remainder of the meeting from which expelled. Any person making personal, impairment, or slander remarks, or who shall become vultures or otherwise violate the council rules shall, while the council is in session, shall be forthwith by the presiding officer, barred from further audience before the speaker, before the council, at a reasonable time period. Personal address the council. When addressing the council, you shall not campaign for public office, promote private business or ventures, make statements unrelated to their topic, address the council on issues that do not concern the service, policies, or affair to the city, make unduly repetitive statements, refuse to stop talking after their time has allowed or has expired, address the council on matter to which the speaker, council, or city is party or currently pending before a court, body, or administrative form. Again, all remarks shall be addressed to the council president or presiding officer and not to other council members, city staff, the audience, or media. And there will be no undue applause and a public outcry allowed. Madam City Clerk.
Approval of minutes of August the 16th.
So move.
Second.
Been properly moved and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Communications from the mayor.
Good morning. It's good to see everybody here this morning. We appreciate you being here. This past Friday, in accordance with the state law, the administration delivered to the City Council copies of the proposed budget for fiscal year 2023. In the fiscal year of 2023, we've added a cost, and we have proposed, in our proposed budget, we've included the cost of living adjustment and minimum wage increase that we added last year, meaning built into this new budget are the raises that we gave last year. In addition, this budget proposes another 2.5% raise, but this time it is a merit raise instead of a cost of living adjustment. If approved, to be the first merit increase city employees have had in more than a decade, and would help attract and retain city employees throughout the city. Just so that you understand that if you take one of our entry-level employees making at an entry-level wage, and that employee has been here for, let's say, 2 or 3 years doing that same job, the new employee would be making the same thing as the guy that's been here 2 or 3 years doing the same job. And there needs to be separation in that. And by giving a merit raise, that allows us to have that separation for the new hires. We're also budgeting $63 million for the capital improvement program so that we can continue to improve our sidewalks, the traffic signals, and parks throughout all 7 city council districts. Our goal, again, in the coming year is to continue funding city services while reducing our debt, while strengthening our pension fund for first responders, and maintaining a budget surplus to ensure that during these changing economic conditions, that it will not negatively impact the city's operations. Because of the past fiscal responsibility in the last year and previous years, we've been able to fund transformational projects that have had a lasting impact on the quality of life for our citizens. Most recently in this past year, the contribution to the Mobile International Airport and the Mobile County Soccer Complex and Aquatic Park. Well, as you know, we've also invested in major infrastructure projects, including Texas Street, which was completed in the past year, and the, Baltimore Street, which was completed in the last year, and the beginning of the rebuild of Texas Street, as well as Ziegler Boulevard. For this 2023 budget, we think that we will continue to build the momentum that we have enjoyed over the last several years, and we look forward to the City Council working with them as we address the questions that they may have, and we look forward to them passing this budget by September 20th, which, according to Zogby, is the requirement. At this time, I want to point out that this is Anitra Henderson's last City Council meeting, and so for many of you who may not realize this, Anitra's been with us for 6 years. She's done a magnificent job. And when I think of Anitra, I really think of the success of the YES Initiative and what that's meant to so many young people over the last several years, over the last 6 years, and what it means for the future of this city. So I've asked Anitra if she could take just a moment and make a couple of remarks, seeing as this is her last meeting.
Well, thank you, Mayor. It has been an honor to serve my city and serve the citizens of Mobile. I won't be too far. I'll still be out asking you to support my wild ideas like the YES Initiative and helping others to build a better community. I would like to thank the City Council and the City Clerk's Office, the Mayor, and the administration for all the great work that we've done. I think we've done some amazing work together, but I really think the best is yet to come. I will be still here in the city working with my family. I think it would be safer for me to stay here as I could, be able to regulate my schedule as opposed to working with family where they always know where you are and where you're available. So thank you for the great work, and I look forward to working with the city in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anitra. And Mr. President, that concludes my remarks.
I'd like to say, Mayor, to Anitra, thank you so much for all the hard work that you had rendered to the city, even doing after, our meetings, in our different community, groups and everything in our neighborhoods. But you will be missed. And again, thank you so much for all your hard work.
Mr. President,
Mr. Penn.
again, I want to join in with my colleague. Thank you, Mrs. Bell Henderson, for the amazing job you have done in the city. Of course, you graduated from the best high school in the world, so it's understandable that you will be amazing. And that's John L. LaFleur, for some of you all might not know. But again, I want to thank you so much for your service, and we look forward to all the different things that you will accomplish and help move the city forward.
Well, Mr. President, Anitra, I'm not going to say that I won't still call you at 6:30 in the morning when needed. And thank you for that time, but I must note that you didn't mention your dad sitting up there in the right-hand corner of the auditorium, Mr. Donald Bell. Mr. Bell, your daughter's done an extremely good job down here, and it's good to see you out and about today.
Mr. President. Anitra, thank you for all of the work that you have done for our city. All of your initiatives, especially the Yes, have made such a tremendous impact, and we just will miss you, but we certainly thank you for all that you have done. And I think you're right, working with your family. We'll be waiting for that phone call when you want to come back. So, but we wish you all the success in the world and look forward to continuing working with you.
Mr. President, I'd also like to say thank you to Anitra for all of the good things that she's brought to this administration and to the city of Mobile. And we look forward to continuing to hear from you in the future if the city clerk's office can be of any help with you in your future endeavors. Adoption of the agenda.
Second.
Been properly moved and second in the discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Agenda's adopted.
Appeals. We have appeal of the ARB denial of installation of wood plank doors at 518 Dolphin Street.
Do we have the, come down and give us your name and your address.
Yes, my name is Matthew Lamond. My address is 10 Houston Street, Midtown. I would like to start by saying thank you for your time, Council, Mayor, and thank you for your service. Bring any of those crazy ideas to the street. We've got plenty of them. But I would like to kind of backtrack to the initial scope of this project. We started with the ARB approval pretty much in the height of getting back to regular life during COVID. We actually did the initial Zoom approval. I was in my car an hour before getting a vaccination, and the approval for this project to get stated was the block where the insider has been installed on the 500 block of Dolphin Street. I do believe that a lot of the concern with the changes of the door, with the supply chain issues that we had, and the amount of time from when the doors were initially installed or initially approved, the facade was, and the changes that were made. My intent was not to sneak anything through the ARB, and it was to stay compliant. Those few blocks are my businesses, and spend more time there than I do my home. So it's important for me to set a good example for the neighbors. With that being said, to go back to the initial application, the chairman of the board stated, Mr. Wagner stated that it is his opinion that the proposed treatment would improve the streetscape and the documented history of the facade is thin. Additionally, on your first sheet that I gave you, Mr. Roberts agreed that it is unknown what the original storefronts looked like, and Ms. Eichels noted that these buildings are sort of blanks, as were other commercial buildings of their era. So with that being said, the doors that were there, I do feel like I didn't necessarily do the doors that were initially approved, but the doors that were put there don't appear to be following the guidelines that I'll just review here quickly, don't appear to be not within compliance. There is no historical data before that to show. Actually, the doors that were prior were aluminum doors and plywood in front of it. I think that these doors improve the plywood that these buildings had before we renovated them. The design review guidelines for Mobile's historic district, which was presented to me, state the current state of the building must be considered prior to the planning changes, preserve the key character defining features of historical commercial facade, repair an altered storefront to its original design, replace a historic storefront to be consistent with the historic location, preserve and repair original materials on historic commercial building whenever possible. If replacement of some material is required, use material that is similar. Additionally, it was plywood in that case. Preserve and repair doors and doorways of historical commercial building. Preserve and repair an original detail ornament on a historical commercial building. So I say that to state that the board even mentioned that there is as little, again, it is unknown what the original storefronts looked like. There's transoms above the doors. The facade is mainly windows. Additionally, in the paperwork that I presented, we do have some neighbor support with the residents that are nearby. And I'm here to answer any additional questions regarding the doors of this property.
Any questions from the council?
Mr. President, I have a question.
Mr. Jones, let's hear from Ms. Kessler, then we'll come back
Okay.
with questions from the council.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Florence Kessler, 121 Pinebrook Drive West, here to speak on behalf of the Architectural Review Board and to ask the council to deny Mr. Lamont's appeal from the decision of the Architectural Review Board. Under the city code, on an appeal to the council from a decision of the Architectural Review Board, the job of the city council is to determine solely the question of whether the board, in rendering its decision, acted beyond the limits of its power or abused its discretion. The board is here today to say that it clearly acted within its power and did not abuse its discretion. This is the story of one door with two applications to the Architectural Review Board. And just, if I could state a minute, the job of the Architectural Review Board is to preserve the historic integrity of historic districts. It does that by applying the design review guidelines, and I've set out a copy of the relevant portion for each council member. The property in question, the application we're here to discuss, is an application made in June of this year for 518 Dolphin Street. And a little history on that application. In front of you, you have a picture of two doors. As Mr. Lamont said, in February of 21, he applied to the Architectural Review Board for approval of his plan. The Architectural Review Board gives approval by presenting a certificate of appropriateness. The board gave a certificate of appropriateness to the door you see on your left. And that's a door that has large glass panes. Now, I'm not an architectural historian. I don't know what doors are appropriate to the architecture of the district and the building at the time. But the guidelines were prepared to create standards for just that question. And the guidelines I've presented to you, if you address doors and doorways for commercial buildings. Now, I need to emphasize commercial buildings because this property is located in a part of Dauphin Street where there are a lot of residential buildings. So the residential buildings are not required to have glass in the door. Glass in the door is typical of a commercial storefront in that historic period. If you look at paragraph standard 7.11, if necessary, replace a door in a fashion that's sensitive to the historic commercial character of the building. First point, use doors with high proportions of transparent glass. And that is the standard, high proportion of transparent glass. That's based on the research and what went into these standards. So fast forward, as Mr. Lamont said, his certificate of appropriateness was approved in February of 2021. And then during the course of construction, what he actually installed is the door that you see to the right on the pictures I've given you, which is a door with no glass panels. So this door does not comply with the Architectural Review Board standards. When Ms. Dawson, who is the director of the Mobile City Historic Preservation Department, reviewed the door for determining whether to issue a certificate of appropriateness, she found that the door did not comply with the door that was in the application, the door that had been approved. In the applications, and I have copies if you want to see, but the application that everybody fills out when they apply for a certificate of appropriateness, they're told in the very beginning, once your plan is approved, if you're going to change your plan, you need to come back to the board and get approval before making any changes. And understood supply chains, understood COVID, understood all of that. But that was the step. That's the way the city, that's the way the Architectural Review Board preserves the historic character of these neighborhoods. So that wasn't done. These doors were installed. And then Mr. Lamont came back to the board and in June of this year and applied for approval of this all wood door that was installed. And it was rejected. The board denied that application for certificate of appropriateness for the all wood doors because they don't comply with the design standards, the same design standards that were brought to the owner's attention before he installed the first door. So a lot has been said about the other buildings on the street. As I mentioned, many of them are residential, so they're not subject to the same standard. Some of them were renovated or built prior to the application of the current standards, so they're grandfathered in. And also, big picture, it's not the job of the ARB to go walking down each street and say, oh, that door's not in compliance, rip it down and install a new one. That's not the way they operate. That would be too intrusive. What they do is when someone is ready to repair, renovate a building, buy a new building, whatever the situation, then before the work is done, application is made to the ARB so the ARB can apply the guidelines and tell the owner what should be done before the door is installed. That's what happened here. It's unfortunate, and I'm not, it was unusual circumstances, as Mr. Lamont says, but the ARB can't preserve historic neighborhoods if owners can just install doors that are inconsistent with the guidelines and not the doors that were originally approved. So considering everything, considering the history of this application, it is clear that in its denial of a certificate of appropriateness at the June 15 meeting, the denial that's before the council right now, the board did not act beyond the limits of its power. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. It enforced the design review guidelines. The board did not abuse its discretion. And I would just like to introduce Mr. Bob Allen as a member of the ARB. He sat in on the decision, and I'd like to ask him if there's anything he'd like to add to explain to council.
My name is Bob Allen. My address is 959 Augusta Street, 36604. What I can tell you is that the way I see my responsibility as a member of the Architectural Review Board is to consider applications that come to the review board for modifications of the exterior of buildings in a historic district, and to apply the standards that we have to that application to determine whether that application meets the standards. If it meets the standards, then it should be approved. If it doesn't, we don't have the authority to approve it. The specific standard that applies in this case is with regard to doorways of commercial buildings. It's, if you need to look at it, it's 7.11. It says, if necessary, replace a door in a fashion, this is in a commercial building, that is sensitive to the historic commercial character. Specifically, use doors with high proportions of transparent glass. And there are two photographs next to that standard that show doors that look very much like the doors that were proposed in the original application and that were approved by the Architectural Review Board because they met the standard. The doors that were placed there and that came to the Architectural Review Board in June of this year for what we call after-the-fact approval, the work's been done without approval, did not meet the standards. Our obligation was to say those doors don't meet the standards, and therefore we cannot approve them. And therefore the application to approve the doors that had been installed not in compliance with the original approval, that request was denied.
Mr. President. Hello, Mr. Reynolds. Mr. Jones.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Lamont, question for you. You had an initial door that changed. When you realized that the door was your plan was going to have to change, was there communication that you took with the review board at that point and let them know that you're going to have to change the design?
That's similar to the timeline that she gave. That is where the biggest issue has come up on this, is that in the timeline of the February 2021 and the extensive build process, the changes were made and that communication was missed. There was no intent to mislead or elude the Architectural Review Board on our main downtown street for this facade. Additionally, I went for the after the fact appeal. Believe me, I'd much rather have done this in the very beginning than do this two and now a third time to do this. I just believe that the words that I'm hearing in the appeal and for the review board as well as here is that it more so sounds like opinion related versus the actual the guidelines outside of the glass, which it doesn't state as clear. Additionally, in February of 2021, the Architectural Review office, their recommendation was to keep the facade aluminum. We took the facade to make that completely, which I would appear to be more historic with the wood facade in what we did. I mean, taking apart any dollar figure out of it, the goal was to preserve that historic as much as possible. Again, I can't apologize enough for the time spent on not communicating this. I mean, I respect the work that they do for our city, and I'm sure I'll have another submission probably soon with their office, with something else as I continue to work in this city. But I don't believe that these doors hinder the architectural aspect when I can continue to go back to 3 different board members stating that there is no historical data for these specific blocks, and it is a blank slate. Additionally, it's not. I didn't put plywood on the doors. There is a transom above, and I would say that the facade is 90% glass. As well as being a commercial building, my goal is to keep the doors open. So that is the intent. Again, I mean, I apologize for the work that they've had to spend on this, and everybody as well. But my intent was to do the best for our community, not to cause any additional work for anyone.
Thank you. Ms. Kessler, in looking at the guidelines, the design review guidelines for the historic committee, when you look at doors and doorways in 7.10 and 7.11, there's 8 guidelines that are applicable to this build. 8 of those are followed, and 1 of them was not. And when I look at the picture of the build itself, it seems to me like the intent of maintaining the architectural backbone to this building, they've done a pretty good job of. So how do we get stuck on one of the guidelines when all of the others were followed?
You're right, Councilman. We're only talking about the doors, not the rest of the building. But the doors that were replaced did have large glass panes. And remember, we're talking about Dauphin Street. We're talking about the heart of commercial historic Mobile.
All right. I will butt in here and correct you. I have been by that building many, many times before it was renovated. It was plywood. This was a dilapidated and blighted building. So it didn't even have a door that I saw.
Ms. Dawson from the Historic Development Commission Director is going to answer that.
Mr. President?
Yeah, Mr. Jones. Yeah, she was going
Council, every line in the design guidelines is important in its own right. The Architectural Review Board does consider building facades as a whole, but the whole is made up of individual elements, including doors. Yes, sir. I'll just repeat. Every line in the design guidelines is important. The board does consider facades as wholes, holistically, as you suggest, but the wholes are made up of individual elements, including both windows and doors. The design guidelines you have before you refer to commercial buildings in Mobile's historic districts. And as commercial buildings, the standard that has been established through these design guidelines, which are based on the United States Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties, are that the doors in commercial properties should be largely made of glass.
These standards were discussed at both times that the property came before the Architectural Review Board. Both times, the need to have large glass panes in the door was discussed, and the door that was ultimately installed, had it been part of the first application, it would have been denied because it doesn't meet the standards. I think the question is, did the ARB act arbitrarily? Did it act beyond its authority? And it didn't. It did its job. It applied the guidelines.
All right, Mr. Reynolds, then Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. So what's before us today is to consider, or we shall determine solely on the question of whether the board, in rendering its decision, acted beyond the limits of its power or abused its discretion. The question I have, I guess, to both parties, in your opinion, the record doesn't make a conclusion. Did the ARB deny Mr. Lamont's application as a result of his failure to install the door as proposed in his first application? Was his second application denied because he failed to install the door as proposed in his first application?
The second application was denied because the proposed door did not meet the design guidelines.
Thank you. And Mr. Lamont, if you have any rebuttal to that, I'd like to hear it. And that's a very straightforward question. Did the ARB deny your application, in your opinion, as a result of your failure to install the door as you originally proposed in your first application?
Yes, I believe that after the fact appeal, it was opinion-based from me not following the original plans in that meeting based off of a non-contributing building.
Thank you, Mr. Lamont. So obviously there's not agreement on that one, so I'm going to have to make a decision on it. The other item is Section 7-11, which is explicit, very clear. And to Ms. Kessler's point, that you must use doors with high proportions of transparent glass. And according to the ARB or Ms. Kessler's testimony here today, if your application had been submitted with the doors you actually installed initially, it would have been denied then. And then once it was eventually installed after the second application, it was denied, I think rightfully so. I find myself on the side of the ARB with this one, which some of you may find as a surprise, but that's where I stand.
Mr. President.
Mr. Davis, then Ms. Gregory.
Ms. Kessler. Is it true that the standard of review on this appeal is whether the ARB acted arbitrarily and capriciously in insisting upon having doors with high proportions of transparent glass?
Well, yes. Whether it abused its power in its application of the design guidelines, correct.
And is it also true that the design review guidelines for Mobile's historic districts in this commercial application in Section 711 state that, if necessary, a door shall be replaced with a door with a high proportion of transparent glass?
Correct.
And that is what the ARB insisted upon.
Correct.
And is it also true that Mr. Lamont installed a door that did not meet the approved standard of the ARB?
Correct.
And is it also true that the application form, which you showed us, states that if you reach a point where you're not going to be able to comply, you come back to the ARB and seek another hearing to get a dispensation?
Correct.
And is it true that Mr. Lamont did not do that?
Correct.
I have a hard time finding under these circumstances that the ARB, either in its first or second hearing, acted arbitrarily or capriciously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Gregory?
Yeah, not to be repetitive. And Mr. Lamont, we understand, things were difficult during that time and communication is tough and you needed to build. So we certainly understand things happen. And we appreciate what you're doing downtown because obviously we need it to be renovated and look great and be a place to draw people in. And we appreciate the work that you're doing there. And while I may not have a bit of problem with the wood, it looks good to me. That's really not the issue. So I just want to go back over one more time. When the ARB met the first time with Mr. Lamont and going through the application, it was very specific that the standard of review was to put the glass panel in. No question about it. Had to be glass. Nobody had any questions about it. And so when he came back again for basically the forgiveness after the fact, it was stated one more time that the design standard is for the glass panel. No questions.
Mr. President?
Mr. Penn?
Mr. Lamont, have you had an opportunity before you started the work to look at the design review guidelines? Did you read this before? Oh, so yes or no? Did you read the guidelines? Okay, so you didn't know. Is that correct? I'm asking you. Did you know 7.11? Okay.
Those doors have been before the review board in previous, and so you're right. I did not know 7. So and so, and I did believe that a solid wood door is approved. Additionally, with what they mentioned about the facade, I would like to correct Councilman Dace that I did go back to their office and speak with them in regards to these doors. He made a comment regarding that I did not go back to their office after this. I did go to their office and did meet with Ms. Dawson to correct this issue, and that's where we got to the process of going to the after-the-fact appeal.
The reason why I ask is because one, it clearly says that, in the guidelines. So that's the reason why I wanted to know, did you know that, by doing this project? And I understand what you're saying. That's one of the questions. Why do other buildings look like that? But my thing is what's in document, what's on paper. A lot of times people can say a lot of things. People tell me a lot of stuff, and they don't go do it. But I got to get it in writing. And in writing, clearly it says 7.11, use doors with high proportion of transparent glass.
So moving forward, any commercial doors and any developments that I may do in the historic district that have to have a high proportion of glass, as well as any other commercial buildings based off of this. There are no exceptions to any of these applications because it is in that bullet point.
That's a great question. Ms. Kelsey.
Hold on. Are you done?
Yeah.
Mr. President.
Mr. Carey.
Before flow, Matt, question. Did you go back to the ARB on your own accord without them going down there and seeing the door and telling you to come back?
No, sir.
Okay. So they saw the door and asked you to come back.
That's right.
Okay.
It was a complete fumble in the project. There was a lot of moving parts to getting this open, and a lot of this is the food hall. I have 5 businesses that have interiorly invested in this also. So the pressure to do that, again, the doors, as important as they are, the intent was not to disrespect the ARB board or the city.
Okay. The building before it was renovated had aluminum storefront glass from end to end, where it was actually, I think, 8 to 12 inches above the ground and then all the way up to the top. Why didn't the recommendation or the guidelines state that the same amount of glass that was there in the beginning had to be replaced because you reduced the amount of glass in the actual storefront, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Also, 2 doors down from you, which is a commercial building, which has 80% of the storefront of it is glass, also has solid wood doors, correct?
That's correct.
Which is the same building, but just attached to your building, not even 50 to 60 feet to the east of your building, but they all have wood solid doors, correct?
That's correct.
Also, another commercial building downtown, which is predominantly glass, in front of Dolphin Street, that fronts is El Papi's. El Papi's wood front door is solid wood. So again, if the guideline states that if the storefront is 90% glass or glass, then the door has to match the storefront, then we have some inconsistencies downtown also. Let me move next door to 5. 5 also has a solid wood front door, and the building is also of a historic nature and character. Also across the street from you, 517 Dolphin Street, 519, and I can't remember the addresses, however, commercial condos.
My own business, O'Daly's, is a solid wood
Right.
door.
Right, I'm getting there, which is a solid wood door with also glass storefront or glass aluminum storefront that goes around it with a solid wood door. Did that go before the ARB?
Yes, sir.
And they granted the solid wood door for that predominantly glass storefront. Even across the street from your current building, and may I quote, the condos that I built in 2008, half of those buildings have solid wood doors. So I think that the misconception here is that we're calling guidelines solid rules. Guidelines are guidelines to be followed in order to get to a concept. A guideline is not a rule stated in stone. And what it is supposed to do is to guide us to reach the proper historic intent. And in this case, it's my belief that the door question, all the way down to the hinges on this door appear to meet a historic guideline in some way. The transom above it is massive, which is glass. And the rest of the building is glass, but with reduced transparency storefront. I could go on all the way down Dolphin Street, pointing out buildings.
The facade actually added glass. Next to the doors was solid, and then the glass storefront with the aluminum was actually frosted.
Yeah, but I'm talking about underneath here.
Yes, yes.
All of that glass was removed from the project.
Right.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually reduced the amount of storefront glass,
Correct.
but the ARB didn't say that we had to maintain the amount of glass in the storefront. If we were replacing it to its true original character as perceived from whatever date that storefront glass was put in there, then that's what we would have done. We have no guideline, we have no picture, we have no concept of the architectural style that was actually there at that time. So it's almost impossible to know exactly what type of door should go there. So the guidelines are there to help us get to a point, but they are, in this case, not a rule of law. I have no problem with the door that's there.
Mr. President.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that comment because I agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Carroll. These are guidelines, and guidelines are to guide us. I sit on the Planning Commission every 2 weeks. We hear proposals, and there are a ton of guidelines with zoning and ordinances that guide that. And every week there are waivers approved by this city for codes, ordinances, etc. I find it hard to believe that the denial by the Architectural Review Board, with all the other conditions being met, that this was not punitive, that they did abuse the discretion for this building, especially given the circumstances of COVID. and the supply chain problems that we have had during that time that we are all familiar with. I put a front door on my house. It took me 8 months, and I had to change it because I couldn't get the door that we initially wanted. What happens if there's zero accommodation in our rules and we're so rigid that we don't allow somebody that wants to come in and pump life into a dead building and change the parameters in keeping with every other historical guideline that we have? One guideline was out of place. And when I look at this building, there's nothing there that says this doesn't stay in lines with every other building on Dauphin Street and is an improvement to our city overall. I think they abused their power in this case. I think it was punitive, and I would say the appeal should be taken into consideration.
Mr. President.
Hold on, Mr. Ken, Mr. Dave, then Mr. Ken.
Thank you, Mr. President. The decision before us, whether there are other wooden doors on this section of Dauphin Street or not, whether we like the wooden door or prefer glass doors or wooden doors, none of that is important. No, it isn't. What's important here, what we have to decide on, is whether the ARB acted arbitrarily or capriciously. All they did was say you got to comply with the standard. We may not like the standard. We may not approve of the standard. The standard may be just a preference, but the ARB did not act arbitrarily or capriciously in insisting on the standard.
Mr. President.
Hold on. I'm done. Ken.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think we didn't get the question answered from the ARB. Have y'all approved other buildings with wooden doors? I mean,
Thanks for the question.
yes.
The question's a little bit broad. Yes, we've approved other buildings with solid wood doors, but they were not commercial buildings along Dauphin Street. The solid wood doors that have been referred to in the vicinity of this building across the street are residential structures. The guidelines that we looked at 7.11 that requires a substantial proportion of transparent glass, that's for a commercial building. Those buildings across the street are residential. There's a different guideline that applies to them. There's been a mention of other buildings, commercial buildings along Dauphin Street in that area. There are some with solid wood doors, but we've looked at a couple of those, and they predate the application of these guidelines along Dauphin Street. So those doors were put in, but there was no approval process that required that those doors meet a particular standard.
So no doors, wooden doors, was approved on commercial buildings in the historic section of Dauphin Street.
I am personally not aware of any solid wood doors on buildings along that part of Dauphin Street. I have not looked at every building along Dauphin Street, so I can't say that to that extent. But I can say that the guideline I have to follow is the one that says on commercial buildings, the door has to be a high proportion of transparent glass.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Carrot and Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. O'Daly's, did it come before the ARB?
I'm sorry?
O'Daly's, did it come before the ARB?
I don't know that. I can't tell you yes or no.
Okay, well, O'Daly's, which is another half a block away, which is fully glass storefront, also has a wooden door, which again is a commercial building. And if I were to go from end to end and remembering back in 2008 and 7, I don't think you were on the ARB at that time, there were other approvals all the way down to St. Joseph Street I can't remember if it was Ann Betzold and Smith, the Sybil Smith building that was built at St. Joseph and Dauphin. That was a glass storefront with a wooden door. I can't remember all the details anymore, but there have been several approvals by the ARB with wooden front doors and glass and storefront glass. I can't remember all those details, and I can't remember if that was right or not, but there have been several approvals over time. Again, we're talking guidelines. We're talking guidelines. And if the standard be set, then also at El Papi's, which wasn't El Papi's, I can't remember the name of it before. Say again? No, 5, I've already mentioned that. El Papi's was 5. No, it was Cafe 615, and it was Michelle Estes, or Michelle, I can't remember who owned it. But their application has a wood door, and it was approved with glass storefront. So the standard, as you say, or I should say the precedent, was already set.
Just quickly, if you look to the cover of the design review guidelines, these guidelines were adopted in May 2nd, 2016.
Are you done, Ms. Carroll?
I love to make a motion. Scott, you guys have anything else?
Mr. President, let me just assist with 2 things. Okay, because one, I think Mr. Jones made a really valid point. Okay, everybody said it time and time again. The standards that you operate under is arbitrary and capricious. That means, of course, it's got to be something factual or legally based that's a problem. In this unique situation, I got to remind everybody, these are your appointees on the ARB, so they operate at your pleasure. You all are the governing body. I say that because of 2 reasons. On the surface, it doesn't sound like arbitrary and capricious. However, if one of or a number of you find one that is punitive, then that is arbitrary and capricious. And you have a legal basis for doing that. If you want to make that finding, you don't have to. The second part is a little bit more intricate in that we're listening. In this particular case, sounds like the ARB is following the guidelines and listening. However, there's a distinct fact here that states we have no idea what this store looked like from the very beginning. These guidelines came in place in 2016. There's also a distinction between commercial and residential. What is the basis for that? It's a guideline. You have the ability to make the distinction in this particular case of whether or not there's an arbitrary and capricious application based on the fact that we don't know, we don't have any idea what this door looked like. That is a fact. That is a unique fact to this particular situation. And I understand the common sense arguments of this was an abandoned building, but we do have the guidelines for a reason. The bigger picture is we may need to take a better look at these guidelines and how they get applied, because this is taking up a great deal of time, but this is a unique situation. After the fact, there's no basis for saying one or the other. Sure, Mr. Lamont should have come back. There is intent involved, but the key issue here is when you have in the record, in the minutes, a particular person who's on the board saying we have no idea what this looks like. How do you supply intent, not of the guideline itself, but in this particular case, if you can't make that application, you have 2 choices here. You can either uphold the appeal or you can grant it. You have basis to do both.
Mr. President, motion to grant the appeal.
Motion and second on discussion, Ms. Gregory.
I did have just one other quick question on the flexibility of the ARB. I guess Bob, you might be the best person on that. How often do you all use your common sense flexibility to either be very strict with the guidelines or go outside a little bit of what those strict guidelines are?
I'm often at odds with what the ARB does, so I hesitate to talk about the common sense aspect of that. I view my job is to look at the guidelines, and if they tell me I have to do something, then I have to do it. It's not a matter of whether I like the doors in this case or not. It's not any other consideration. It's what does the guidelines say I have to do? In this case, it says the glass needs to be in the door. That's it. That's my approach.
And these were put into effect in 2016. So when you are remodeling after 2016, then these things are what you all look at,
Correct.
as opposed to maybe what's been done in the past.
That's right.
Thank you.
Mr. Days.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, let me just put it this way. I think if we approve, first of all, let me say that I appreciate everything Mr. Lamont has done in order to restore these buildings in our downtown. And I'm not going to go back over all of my previous arguments. I'm just going to say that if we approve this appeal, what we're saying to every applicant out there is you can come to the Architectural Review Board. You can receive direction from the Architectural Review Board, and then you can ignore that direction. I don't think that's a good precedent to set.
Mr. President,
Discussion, Mr. Reynolds.
one last comment. Hopefully we'll call for the question. I all the time find myself at odds with what are we preserving? Just all the time. And I think that gets to the crux of the guidelines, rules, reason the Architectural Review Board is in place. You know, what we want our city to look like down the road. Those are discussions that I think would be important to this city and make it easier for applicants to develop blighted areas or areas where there's an aluminum door with a piece of plywood on the front of it. We should explore all of those things, no doubt about it. And I think our city would benefit from that. But there is no question in my mind that the Architectural Review Board, with the guidelines spelled out the way they are, acted within their capacity and within their authority. Even though we may not like it or I may not like it, I think the door's fine one way or the other. But with regard to acting arbitrarily, I don't see it here. So call for the question.
Discussion. Another discussion. All in favor of Mr. Carroll?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed.
All right. Fails.
No supermajority. How do we handle that?
Madam Clerk.
We have requests for a waiver of the noise ordinance on September 3rd in Mill Street Park, September 3rd on Wellington Street, October the 1st in Ladd Peoples Stadium, October the 8th in Cathedral Square, August the 27th in Langham Park, and October 15th in Langham Park.
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved in second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Appeal passes.
Public hearings today is the public hearing to rezone property located at 4119, 4161, 4173, 4175 Halls Mill Road from R1B3 and I1 to I1.
Just open up the public hearing for these particular set items. If anyone would like to address the council, you may do so by coming down to the podium and stating your name and your address.
Mayor Stimson, Mobile City Council. I am Leon Turner. I live at 229 B Street in the city of Pritchard, Alabama. I own a piece of property that you are proposing to be rezoned. And I came here, not here, I went to the Planning Commission on March 3rd of 2022 because the adjacent property was 300 feet of my property, and it was proposed for heavy industrial. I questioned the Planning Commission at that time, what type and this and that. But I haven't received any other notification from the Planning Commission whether the March 3rd because they continued it. So I don't know if the heavy industry is still going to be next to my property, but I really don't know whether to oppose or go for it. But I just want to get further information. Is what I want. What do you say you want to make it light industrial? But my question still is it heavy industrial next to the light industrial?
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Reynolds.
My understanding, this is light industrial, I-1. It's taking a property that's already I-1 for a large portion of it, and a property that is B3, and a property that is R1,
Yes, sir.
and rezoning all of those to one light industrial classification. So there is no I-2, which is heavy industrial.
Okay.
And I recall your comments at the Planning Commission. I appreciate you making those comments. So they were able to work with the landowner to have them pull back their request for I-2 heavy industrial in this area.
Thank you so much.
This matches I-1, which exists all through this area. This is a industrial and corridor. So properties of this sort, I think, are very fitting, and I think they fit the map for Mobile as well.
Thank you very much for your explanation. That's what I came for, and I have no opposition.
Do we have anyone else that would like to address the council on this particular said property? If not, the public hearing is closed.
Presentation of petitions and other communications to the council. Dr. Sonia White. Dr. Sandra Parker.
Good morning. I just wanted, do I need to tell you my address? Sorry. 5741 Southland Drive. I just wanted to update y'all today. I've met most of you and appreciate everything y'all have done to help Alta Point and your interest in Alta Point. But I just wanted to update y'all on some things we're doing. And as y'all know, we've been around since the 1960s. Our original name was Mobile Mental Health. We've gone through a couple of name changes. We're now Alta Point. But one of the things that has not changed since the 1960s is our number one mission, which is to serve the people of Mobile County that have serious mental illness, particularly the underserved and uninsured people of Mobile that have serious mental illness. Our second mission is a training mission. As y'all know, there are not enough people in the whole country, and certainly there are not enough in Mobile to treat patients with serious mental illness. So one of our big missions is we're training young psychiatrists, we're training nurse practitioners, we're training physician's assistants, training med students, we're training nurses, we're training all these young learners to develop a passion for working with mentally ill people, especially, as I mentioned, people who have no insurance and have nowhere else to go to get treatment for mental illness. As y'all know, some of you have visited our Behavioral Health Crisis Center, and we have started that. We're seeing a great reduction in the number of people that are mentally ill who are being carted off to jail, which is the mission of having that there. We're also avoiding people who have to go to the ER and wait long wait times. They're able to come directly to our Behavioral Health Crisis Center, and we're very proud of that, and our doctor that heads up that program. As y'all know, we're also involved with Metro Jail and have a great affiliation working agreement with them. And Dr. Cindy Gibson's going to follow me and talk about some of the training we're doing with Mobile Police Department to, decrease people from getting into terrible situations with the jail. Two last things, we've started the 988 crisis line, which y'all know is the national crisis line, and Alta Point is serving in that capacity. We've had a number of people call, and we feel like have saved some lives. Lastly, I wanted to mention our Integrated Care Initiative, which is a national initiative where we're treating people with serious mental illness, and we're also treating their hypertension, their diabetes, their heart disease. If you see places in Mobile going up that are called Accordia, when you see the Accordia name, you know that that's where we're treating serious mental illness and primary care problems of these patients as well. And I just want to thank y'all for everything y'all do. I really see how patient you have to be in this job after this morning. I've never been to a meeting, but thank y'all for all of that.
Thank you.
Dr. Cindy Gibson.
Good morning, Dr. Cindy Gibson with Alta Point, 2401 Gordon Smith Drive. First off, I want to thank you all, thank the mayor and Public Safety Director Batiste for allowing us to work with the city and with Mobile PD on a project to increase officer training in mental health and to incorporate co-response where a mental health clinician goes out with law enforcement. And we're really focused on diverting individuals who are seriously mentally ill from arrest and incarceration. And they spend longer in jail when they're incarcerated than an average person does. And one of the unique things so far, we've been to Harris County, Commander Graves and myself and a group of officers, Officer Duffy up there as well, to receive some training at a really progressive site that we're anxious to bring back to Mobile. And week before last, we were involved in a situation where a gentleman that was known to us received a call from Commander Graves, and he asked, "Can you reverse address someone in your system?" And I said, "No, but if you tell me the address, I can probably tell you who it is." And I said, "I'm actually headed out there right now." And it was a barricaded subject who otherwise something terrible might have happened, but we gave officers on the scene all the information that they needed to be able to manage that call and understand exactly what was going on with this individual and prevent an arrest. He immediately went to the hospital and everybody came out of that situation safe. That's our goal with training and with the co-response, is to provide individuals with that service on the scene. And we write grants for those programs through the Department of Justice and utilize that funding. And we appreciate the mayor's ability to allow us to do that and work together. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank you and Dr. Parker for coming down and giving us updates. We know that mental illness is something serious, in our communities. And again, we do appreciate you all coming down and giving us updates and everything, and also to the police department also for your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Robb.
Good morning. I'm John Robb. I live at 1440 Regency Oaks Drive West, and I'm president of Friends of Mobile Trees. FOMT is a non-political IRS-approved 501c3 corporation. Our directors are fully qualified to raise tax-deductible contributions through private and corporate donations and grants. Our sole purpose is to give these funds to the city to restore Mobile's treescape and plant new species where appropriate. Vibrant trees benefit our health and our economy. Charleston's a top world tourist destination largely because of their live oaks. Yet Mobile's live oaks are even more impressive. In early March, an IRS specialist approved FOMT's application without any restrictions in just 5 days. I reported this great news to the Tree Commission March 15th, and a $10,000 grant to cover startup costs. At my suggestion, the commission voted to revive their dormant new tree committee to identify a few small shovel-ready test projects. We also discussed landscaping Airport Boulevard from Azalea to I-65. You can read the draft minutes for details that I gave to Ms. Lambert. We agreed to continue our discussion at the next meeting. But the commission has canceled every monthly meeting since. At last Tuesday's August meeting, not one commission member showed up. Assistant City Attorney Montero has called a follow-up meeting for tomorrow. Tree Commission members say failure to reach quorum is why they haven't met. Yet during the pandemic, they met regularly by Zoom. After the pandemic ended, they stopped meeting. Counselors, this looks to us more like a boycott or deliberate obstruction of city business than a quorum issue. FOMT is asking you for remedial action. First, report back on why the MTC members have not met since March 15th. Then, take appropriate action. Second, appoint reliable people to fill the tree commission's 2 vacant slots. Councilor Small, I understand that you plan to appoint Steve Kane, and I know his work firsthand. He is an excellent choice. I've used him out at my house, top notch. And Mr. Carroll, I understand you've got recently a new appointment who's also excellent, but we have 1 slot that's still open. Third, increase the city's urban forestry budget. Mr. Peter Toller is doing a great job under tough circumstances, including hurricanes. Yet one arborist can't adequately meet the daily challenges of a city this large. Fourth, improve transparency. Nothing has been posted on the MTC webpage since May. Their phone mailbox has been full since April. Emails and text messages are rarely returned. Thank you. Could I just ask a quick question? Which council member has not yet appointed someone?
Just ask your question to me. Yes.
Oh, which council person has not yet appointed a member?
There are some council members that have not appointed. We had the discussion this morning during pre-council and said, talk about the emergency of going ahead and get this, the council to make sure that their appointees are going to meetings and make sure that the ones that have not appointed the one just go ahead and make their appointments and everything. So we appreciate you coming down and addressing those concerns and bringing it to our attention so we can go ahead and move the city forward and everything.
Mr. President.
Mr. Reynolds.
Mr. Robb, thank you for coming down here and being an advocate for the trees and treescape of Mobile. I haven't appointed anyone to the board. Sometimes hard to find folks that are willing to serve on these volunteer boards. So if you could get with me and let's see if we can find someone maybe that you know within your circle that may be interested in serving the city on this board. If you could reach out. As a constituent of District 4, you are. So, thank you, Mr. Robb.
All right. Thank you so much for coming down. Madam Clerk.
Sabrina Mass regarding Resolution 01709.
Good morning, everyone. Sabrina Mass, 1050 Belvedere Circle West. Good morning, City Council members, Mayor Simpson and staff, and Ms. Lambert and staff. I'm here to speak about the Top Golf initiative. While I will say I am definitely in favor of Top Golf coming to Mobile, Alabama, I think it would be a great thing for the city of Mobile, Alabama. But however, I cannot, as a citizen and a taxpayer, I cannot say that I am in agreement with the city giving the $1.25 million to a $1 billion company. And then, as I researched, I see where Huntsville, Alabama and Madison County, Alabama have Top Golf, but they did not expend any city funding to Top Golf, and it's very successful as they chose to use their funds for infrastructure, streets, and other projects that were needed in the city. As we know, the city of Mobile needs many things done to the city of Mobile. And my problem is, at what point, so now you're gonna be giving taxpayer money to private proprietors? I don't agree with that. And if that's the case, I don't see that how the money cannot be distributed to the people in the city that come here often and ask for funding for projects that are needed in Mobile, such as Driftwood Housing Project, Success for the Future even. And these are projects that are going to be known and needed in this city. So I cannot stand here as a citizen to say that I am in favor of the $1.25 million to be given to a $1 billion company. But I do want the Top Golf to be here. I would utilize the Top Golf. But we cannot just, it doesn't make any sense to supply a $1 billion company with $1.25 million from the city of Mobile. And another thing, I see where Ms. Ludger was asking a simple question about the livable wages. Okay, why can't they answer the question about a livable wage? What is their definition of a livable wage? Is it minimum wage? Because that's not a livable wage. If we're going to be bringing these things to the city, and they want the money, they should answer a simple question. What is the livable wage? Give us a dollar figure to help the young people. And if they do come, I would say, I hope they are culturally diverse in their hiring practices. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank
Mr. President,
you. Yes, Mr. Jones.
I just want to correct one thing with regards to the Huntsville build. I was familiar with that. The infrastructure they put in went directly to support that Topgolf. So it didn't go to other projects within the city. It went directly to that project. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Sylvia Reed regarding Resolution 21717 and 01709.
Good morning, to the City Council and to all the staff, the administrative staff of Mobile. But I'm here also to speak on the project concerning the golf. I believe it's the inside project. And I am not, as she was saying, I'm not against, well, I live at, first of all, 1783 Princeton Wood Drive West, Mobile, Alabama. And as I continue, I'm not against the project, but I'm against the way how business are handled as far as priority in Mobile. And as long as it's not being used, the city funding to do projects that brought in, such as those kind of projects due to housing, and also due to the fact that where the money might be possibly coming from to place in those businesses coming in, and not only business coming in. And we just say that is because, for one thing, I have a personal reason for investments in Mobile. I have some stolen retirements, and I'm concerned that those investments are being used in those projects. So if so, I'm going to ask you all not to do that part, and I still have a problem with the investments that's not housing right now to come into the city of Mobile.
Reggie Hill regarding 706, 707, 01709, and 21719.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. Before I begin, we may not have always agreed, but I do wish Director Henderson well on her next journey. Best wishes as you move forward. To the citizens and stakeholders of Mobile, good afternoon. Reggie Hill, 1007 Center Street. I rise today to address those matters. I'll probably take them a little bit out of order. I'll start with 21717. And this is the $300,000 engineering support related. What was stated in pre-meeting was that this was leftover money. So I'll submit this formally so it can be asked and it can be on the record. How much leftover money do we have that's just able to be allotted towards initiatives or anything else that could be presented to the body? That was the sentiment this morning. I'd like to answer on that, please. 60, 706, and 707. It was interesting. Last week I submitted some information about communications, amending Chapter 2 of Mobile Municipal Code. I believe Mr. Jones saw today the extent of how abuse of power can affect the citizenry here, and this is something that we need to take into consideration. So again, as I've asked several times before, is there any reason why these matters wouldn't be approved unanimously, and would there be anything to prevent them from getting out? The reason why I ask that is because there are organizations, as we all know, that were approved way back in March of last year. So this is what, maybe probably 17 or 18 months, and those resources still have yet to be released. So I'm hoping that there's nothing that's going to prevent this from going forward. And lastly, I want to speak to 01709. Enduring progress, I believe, was not something that was intended to be easy, but it was something that was intended to be reflective and fair to all citizens. And this is something that is very important as we look at this matter before us regarding the Topgolf. Now, since the integration of Murphy High School until the year in which I graduated in 2005, there were only 2 people who looked like me to even play on the golf team, and I was one of them. So golf is my favorite sport, and I would love to see it within the city. But as mentioned before, there are so many other things that I believe we need to be examining with how we use our resources. How is it that we are holding back $1,000 for things that are data proven and that work, but we're willing to put $1 million up for something where we see that this is not consistent across the board, even with their business. So I want it here. Let's not get that confused. But how we're going to utilize the resources to pay for it, that's what we need to be considering. These cities, they might have invested resources for the infrastructure towards the property, but that wasn't a direct payment to the business. We are taking direct taxpayer resources to invest in a project when there are other things that need the attention of our taxpayer funds that are completely being ignored. So while, again, I want to be very clear about wanting the project here, we have issues that need to be taken care of, and regardless of what we spend our money on, if we're not taking care of the basics, it's all going to be for naught. We see buildings right across the street for naught, the building on that property for naught. So let's please take a look at that before we just invest taxpayer resources. Thank you for yielding the floor.
Thank you.
Resolutions held over. 08693, approved purchase orders for fuel for various city departments. 08694, approved purchase order to Gulf Coast Truck and Equipment for mobile charging station for electric garbage truck. 08695, approved purchase order to Thompson Tractor for emergency generator for fire station number 16. 08696, approved purchase order to UAV Survey LLC for annual renewal of software for MPD Cyber. 08697, approved purchase order to GT Distributors of Georgia for ballistic helmets and headsets for police administrative services. 08698, approved purchase order to North American Fire Equipment for rescue equipment kits for Mobile Fire Rescue Department. 08699, approved purchase order to Precision Delta Corp for ammunition for MPD. 08700, approved purchase order to Global Industries for office furniture for MPD. 21701, authorized contract with Iker Construction Corporation for synthetic turf at Matthews Park.
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item passes.
Ordinance is being introduced. 64042.
Per council rules, this ordinance will be laid over for 1 week.
Consent resolutions being introduced. 06704 through 03723.
Move to waive the rules for immediate consideration of these resolutions as read.
Been properly moved and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Rules are waived.
06704, correct the minutes of June 7th, 2022 by listing ordinance 57032 in its entirety. 58705, assess cost for removal of weeds, Weedling Group 1628. 6706 and 707 are determined appropriations to Booker T. Washington Middle School and Maryville Elementary School serve a public purpose and approve payment. 03722 and 723 are appointing Chris Carroll to the Board of Adjustment and Stevie Kane to the Mobile Tree Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Resolution passes.
CIP resolutions being introduced 21708 through 21718.
By council rules, this resolution will lay over for 1 week.
Resolutions being introduced 01709 through 25720.
By council rules, these resolutions will also be laid over for 1 week.
Call for public hearings. 41721, call for public hearing to consider adoption of the 2022-2023 General Fund Capital and Convention Center budget scheduled September 6th.
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Public hearings called.
Announcements.
District 6, Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask the city to formally relook the design review guidelines. If we're going to take those as mandates versus guidelines, I think they need to be relooked. Thank you.
District 2, Councilman Carroll.
Not really, Mr. President, but just a brief statement. I know that the Church Street East and Down the Bay communities have been involved ongoingly with communications with the administration and presentations from Populous and also from the United States Corps of Engineers, about the possible construction and renovations of buildings on site. I want to reiterate for the record and in public to the council and to the administration the importance of a master plan for that site. As you saw today, there was really no consensus on the council for a decision made by the ARB, which involved one building on Dolphin Street. But however, there are going to be several buildings on the Civic Center property, all of which require ARB review. Even the Corps of Engineers building, which may come in here and, as what happened in the ARB's meeting the other day, suggest something totally arbitrary from what the ARB wishes to do. There is no reason for us to rush through the process. The process has been set in place so that we don't make mistakes and we don't inadvertently affect neighborhoods with the things that we do. So it's my request, and again, I'm going to say this, that we slow this down a little bit and make sure that there is a solid master plan in place, because I have seen the EDSA proposal referred to as a master plan. I was here when that was done. The picture or rendering on the face of that was not the intent for people to believe that we're putting houses there. It was actually ground fodder so that we'd have a place to fill the form up there, but we're showing it off as if though it was the intent for a master plan when it wasn't. There must be a master plan.
Thank you, Councilman Carroll. District 5, Councilman Days.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Council Finance Committee will meet 1 week from today at 1:00 p.m. in the, are we going to meet upstairs? Or we meet down here for the, we'll meet upstairs, yes, because we won't be taking public hearing. We won't be taking public comment. Anyway, the City Council Finance Committee will meet upstairs on the 9th floor conference room August 30th in order to consider the budget, fiscal year 23 budget, which has been submitted by the administration. This will be a working session for the City Council to ask questions of the administration. No public comment will be taken. We have just ordered the public hearing on the budget, which will take place here on September 6th as part of our regular City Council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Days. District 4, Councilman Reynolds.
No announcements.
Councilman Penn, District 1.
Thank you, Mr. President. On this past week, we had some issues with the lighting at Sage Park, the basketball park. And I want to thank the administration and Parks and Recs to making sure that they fix that situation. Just a reminder to the public, I cannot direct any city employee to do anything. That's a removable offense. But I will be an advocate and make sure that we get that information. And I'm so grateful for the administration, Mobile Parks and Recreations, for assisting me in that matter. Also, I have a very important constituent here. Today, I'm celebrating my 14-year anniversary. So my wife came to council meeting with me today to celebrate. So you'll wave. Thank you for coming. This is our first council meeting. Thank you, Mr. President.
Congratulations, Mr. Penn. District 7, Vice President Gregory. Okay. And to the citizens of District 3, I announced last week that we're going to have a community meeting. District meeting in the Maysville community. It will be held on Tuesday, October the 4th at the Revelation Missionary Baptist Church at 6:00 p.m. Notices will go out to each individual neighbors. But again, that meeting will be held on Tuesday, October the 4th at 6:00 p.m. at the Revelation Baptist Church, and we will be discussing items that's going on in our community. Do we have anything else from this council? Anything from the administration?
Motion to adjourn.
Been properly moved and second in the discussion.